Hi, it's Rebecca, just popping in at the start of this episode to say it might sound like Kat's trapped me in an echoey hole and is forcing me to talk about Jordan Peterson, but that's only partly true. Please don't worry about my safety, my audio is just a bit dodgy due to a technical glitch. If you've never listened to our podcast before, let me assure you that we usually both sound as crisp and clear as Kat does on this recording. Now, let's get on with the show.
Think again, sunshine.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson, clinical psychologist, the postmodernist, he's here to abolish it. In the fight against the Marxist apologists, order to the chaos, he's here to get us out of it. Identity politics, we here to ruin, prevent the recoming of the Soviet Union. Whether it's with Rubin or with Joe Rogan, he's the one chosen, clean up your own slogan. He put me on the right route and sorting my life out and bringing meaningful purpose to my lifestyle. Yeah, with a mastermind intellect, father of the internet, but he's been a threat.
I'm not doing this. That's that. I'm not using the words that other people.
Hi, and welcome to The Seeker
And the Skeptic.
I'm Kat, and I'm the flaky, unpredictable, irrational seeker.
And I'm Rebecca. I'll be your sarcastic, grumpy, close-minded, skeptical host. Or maybe we should just be ourselves.
Sounds good to me. This podcast is going to dive deep into controversial topics that some may call new age or woo-woo, or just plain foolish.
And look at them with a skeptical but open-minded approach that will hopefully encourage understanding and acceptance from both the skeptics
And the seekers. At long last, I've convinced Rebecca that we need to talk about Jordan.
To be fair, we already talk about him quite a lot.
But this time we're recording!
So we spent an evening talking about Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life at a local book club. So this episode we're going to talk about that book and what the book club made of it and the Jordan Peterson phenomena in general.
Yeah, so 12 Rules for Life is JBP, or Jordan Peterson's second book, and it's basically, it came from I think it was a Quora post. So this is, I don't know how many years ago, but, 5 to 6 years ago, when Jordan was kind of giving his opinions about, what makes a good, meaningful life. And this kind of grew out of his big work, which was Maps of Meaning, which is, if anyone's tried to read it, it's hard going.
I've read extracts and they're pretty hard.
Yeah. But he definitely pulls on some of the same themes and condenses it into 12 snappy rules.
Yeah, so they're like, I guess it's kind of self-help.
Yes, without doubt.
I can't remember. Oh my god, I can't actually remember any of the rules.
What?
One is always pet a cat if you see it on the street.
If you see it on the street, yep.
So it's obviously not a literal rule that he expects you to do, but it's just an opportunity for him to like ramble on.
Yes.
Or should I say, pass wisdom on.
I would take that.
Yeah. About, related topics and sort of some general ideas to how to make your life better. It's a self-help book, right?
Yes. So, as a skeptic, how did you...
Oh my goodness, yeah. As a skeptic coming into this, there's a lot of opinions about Jordan Peterson in the skeptic community, and they're sort of all over the place. He's kind of like a love-hate, polarising figure.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of stuff that he said that's just factually inaccurate about the world, or sort of he's implied factually inaccurate things about the world, like some stuff about climate change. There's some misrepresentation of some legal stuff in Canada, which we'll get into later. So the stuff that he said that's untrue. He's also a Christian, or again, we can talk about this later, but he advances like a kind of Christian. So skeptics aren't so keen on that. Most skeptics are atheists. But then again, there are a lot of skeptics who really like his general method, his general sort of message of looking out for yourself and individualism. There's lots of libertarian skeptics in America, for example, who really like all that sort of stuff. So this is all buzzing around in my head. There's loads of opinions about Jordan Peterson, and it's kind of, in a way, I wouldn't say Jordan Peterson's done this, but the skeptics movement has kind of divided along two lines, one of which are much more sympathetic to him, and one half which isn't. And my experience of him has been hearing about him from you, and I really don't know what to expect out of this book. And then on top of that, I'm going to a book club. And the last time I went to a book club, they were talking about the Celestine prophecy. Have you read that?
I want to.
Oh my god. So this book, it was just, you might like it.
I think I would.
But from my perspective, it was just bullshit from beginning to end, and it wasn't even like creative bullshit. So I came into the book club with all my notes, because I always come prepared, and I came prepared for this evening as well, to tell everyone, point out all the inaccuracies in it and how rubbish it was. And then it wasn't until I was like halfway through my long diatribe about the book that I realised that this is the first time at this book club, that every week or month or however often they met, someone chose their favourite book, and that's what we were talking about. And there was someone around the table whose favourite book it was, and I just reeled back. Like I felt like that kind of that stereotypical grumpy skeptic who comes in and ruins everyone's fun. So I've had bad experiences with book clubs in the past. I feel like Jordan Peterson in general is a controversial topic, so I'm going in kind of apprehensive, to be honest.
Fair enough. As a seeker, I guess I see Jordan Peterson as, I mean, the second coming, I guess would be the closest. I mean, he, you know, Jesus' first name starts with a J, and Jesus hates Christ. Yeah. So no, I'm like an unapologetic fan of Jordan Peterson. For the most part, I came across him from the controversy in the newspapers. I think it was my dad, weirdly, who told me about him. That, you know, some professor of this university in Toronto was refusing to use pronouns because of a law that was either passed or trying to be passed. Anyway, after that, looked into a couple of YouTube videos and kind of quickly saw my other sources of information, which might be different, like podcast interview shows, Joe Rogan, all of that. And the more you see somebody, and for me, a lot of little things that he was talking about, and more importantly, the way he talks is very appealing. Absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, for me, just all of the things added up. He was, you know, talking about my hero, Carl Jung, my heroes on The Lion King, all of these different reasons to, in addition, like, you know, talking about people's personality type and talking about how you can be a better person. And obviously I am really interested in personal development and always growth seeking. So it was interesting to have his both clinical psychologist take on things, but also with this mythopoetic flavour to everything.
There's like there's this perception, and I don't know how true it is, that all of his fans are like young white teenage boys.
Yeah, I mean, I am in my heart.
Well, we did, full disclosure, this is not my first experience with Jordan Peterson. Kat and I went to see him and Sam Harris debate at the O2 in London when they were there, and part of the reason we went is because I'm definitely more on the Harris side and Kat's on the Peterson side. In fact, we even talked about maybe getting t-shirts with Harris and Peterson.
Team Harris, Team Peterson.
Yeah. But at that audience, it was quite mixed. I'd say it was predominantly male, which is kind of unsurprising for these are people who are famous through podcasts and YouTube. Podcasts and YouTube audiences tend to be male, so maybe that skews it a little bit. But I was thinking maybe at this book club, all the people at this book club would be young men.
Yeah.
Which was not the case at all.
Yeah, and similarly, I've only had one experience with a book club before, and that happened to be, again, similar to the person who organised the book club, young white women. So again, I think it's more to do, I'm realising now that often book clubs might be more to do with the person who organises it. Because I feel like I was introduced to the book club from a member, and I mean, I don't know how you would summarise us, but I feel like we were all, you assumed that we were all interested in personal development.
I actually said to someone, I said to this woman, I can't remember what she was saying, but she said, you know, people like us are interested in X, Y, and Z. And I said, oh, what do you mean people like you, like people who are into personal development? Because I assumed that's the crowd I was in. One of the reasons I assumed that was because the organiser of the book club, John, he had a t-shirt that said, I can't keep calm, I'm an ISTJ, which is a Myers-Briggs type. So I was like, oh, this is the crowd. They're into Myers-Briggs, they must be into personal development. But when I said that to her, she said, oh, no, I meant entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, interesting.
And even though she said that, I feel like it's both and. because I do also think that they go hand in hand, don't they?
Yeah, entrepreneurship and personal development.
So I think that would be a good way of classifying us. But also then there are other things of, you know, most people live in Hove or even West Hove. And it's like, who are the kind of people you're going to find there? Usually pretty open-minded, maybe middle class.
Left-leaning.
Yep, all of that.
So we come into this household, just your typical kind of British middle-class home. Like, they're very welcoming. Very welcoming. I mean, we did bring brownies and wine.
Which always helps.
Wine, that's pretty good. We were super early.
Yeah, and yeah, just made feel welcome. John told us about some of the previous books that they had discussed. And again, good reason to think that personal development was a theme. All of the books, I believe, are non-fiction. So this is a non-fiction book club. Quite a bit of like Jonathan Haidt, Gretchen Rubin. Can you think of anyone else? But
yeah, they were all kind of sort of self-help / psychology.
Yeah. It's definitely not like the lowest hanging fruit self-help. It's definitely the more for thinking folk.
Yes. And the people, as they started to turn up, we were probably the youngest people there, I'd say. Yes. They were all sort of in their 40s, 50s.
Proper grown-ups.
Yeah, proper grown-ups. With all the accoutrements you would expect of proper grown-ups. So it wasn't a bunch of angry white teenage boys, which I was like, oh, well, this will be even more interesting because we'll get the perspectives of people who are not in necessarily his target demographic and see what they think and, you know, the sort of the gist that they pick up from this book.
And it was very well organised. I mean, something that I really liked was knowing in advance the order of things. So I knew we were going to get some food and it was going to be easy because we just got it served up on a plate and we could kind of serve ourselves some salad.
It was so good as well. And she went out of her way. I can't remember John's wife's name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Margaret. Let's go on Margaret listening. But I contacted her in advance because they said on the initial emails, can you mention if you have any special dietary requirements? So I sent an email saying, sort of in my typical apologetic way, oh, I'm vegan, but don't worry about it. I'll just have whatever you want.
I'll just eat leaves.
Yeah, I'll just eat leaves. Because I don't expect anyone to make a big fuss for me. And I really wasn't expecting that. And often you go to things and they will just, like, if they're making pasta, you'll just get plain pasta because the sauce has meat in it. And it's not ideal, but it's better than nothing and you're getting free food. So you don't complain. Anyway, she'd gone out of her way to make a special vegan lasagna with vegan cheese and everything in a separate thing. It was like a whole lasagna. It's like something I'd make for 3 people. She made just for me. It was so sweet.
It was very sweet. And again, just we were the new people and I didn't feel like...
I felt so welcome.
Yeah.
It was really nice. I immediately felt part of the group. And like you say, because he provided us with the sort of order of events.
Yes.
And this really, really thorough overview of the book.
Yeah, something that like I think you could charge people for. I mean, the whole thing you could charge people for, if I'm honest. But yeah, he kind of like summarizes the points and doesn't just kind of give you very basic bullet points. He really translates the book in a easy to digest way. So I would say that you wouldn't even have had to read the book to participate in a meaningful way.
I think one of the women there are about 8 of us. I think one of the women there said she hadn't read the book, that she just read John's summary.
Oh, yeah.
So I think some people do that. So he'd given us the summary, which was like 10 A4 pages or something, quite detailed. And then he also gave us a list of questions to think about.
Which we did, and I thought we wouldn't really go through them. They would be a rough guide. And it sounds like sometimes they don't get through all the questions. But even that was somehow done perfectly.
Yeah, we went through them all in order, and these are proper in-depth questions. So because there was, I don't know, like 15 questions, and they're all quite in-depth questions, we're not going to talk you through all of them. Although if you email us, then we can send you John's stuff. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to share, and you can get an overview of the book and the questions. So we're just going to throw through a few of the questions that we found memorable and talk about what we think about them and what the other people in the book club thought about them. So what was the first one?
Was it, how easy do you find it to change your mind when you learn something new?
Yeah. How easy do you find it to change your mind when you learn something new or listen? There's like a two-part question.
One comes from Rule 8 and the other from Rule 9.
Yeah. So I think Rule 8 is something along the lines of you should try and change your mind when you learn something new. And Rule 9 is it's super important to... This is how Jordan Peterson says it. He says, it's super important that when you're listening to someone, you consider that they might know something that you don't. That's a direct quote, I'm pretty sure.
Yes. That is it. That is what it all comes down to. But, continue.
Anyway, so this is one of the questions that I found really interesting. because to me it speaks to a lot of like things we talk about as skeptics and the cognitive biases we have that stop us from learning new things and stop us from acting on new things when we learn them.
Yeah.
And I also thought it was really interesting that the two rules are sort of pushed together in John's question because, as I said when this question was being talked about at the table, have you really learnt it if you haven't changed your mind? Can you learn something new and not change your mind? Surely learning is the process of either gaining new knowledge, adding to your body of knowledge, which would be changing your mind, or altering something you already know.
Yeah, it's almost like, have you metabolized that food or have you just shat it out?
That's nice. Oh, lovely.
I thought that analogy was going really well until...
No, it's true though. I've had this thought when doing like therapy and stuff, how you can know something intellectually and not fully have like
embodied it.
And it's weird how
100%.
we have these different levels of understanding.
And something that Peterson talks a lot about is knowing what somebody believes or thinks based on how they act, which is massive. And this kind of comes down to that. It's, you know, if you've really learnt something, how is that affecting your behaviour? And continue.
Sorry, the other thing I thought was how far easy do you find it to change your mind when you learn something new or listen? Listening is key because we selectively listen to things that we know are going to confirm our beliefs.
Yeah.
So it's almost like an unconscious process that happens that you find yourself getting bored, you find your attention drifting off, or you just don't remember that bit.
Yeah. And
because on some level you know that it's going to lead you down a path that is not congruent. You already believe and you don't experience that dissonance, so you don't even listen to it in the first place. I just think that's such a fascinating thing our brains do.
Yeah, and it can happen at different levels. You know, what you were talking there is about it being at an almost, I would say, subconscious level. It's hearing something, but like you said, almost subconsciously emitting what doesn't fit in with your current schema.
Yeah.
But then there's, I think, a more active not listening, which is, you know, people fucking interrupting. And this is what definitely didn't happen at the book club. I will say this, like, there was some pro listening going on.
I'm now hesitant to say anything.
Yeah,
and that's what
I felt. Me too. I think we were all thinking that, and like most of the people there were introverts as well. So I think we were all just pussyfooting around each other a little bit.
It was, we ended up getting into a really interesting conversation, and one of the women in the book club had run workshops on listening.
Yes, Patty, that was very interesting, and I think she gave some exercise which interested me, which was something to do with, like, or maybe that was somebody else talking about it, but listening to somebody with, like, and not letting yourself speak, and giving them like maybe 10 minutes, and then the other person has 10 minutes. Could you think of any more?
I think one of the other exercises she mentioned was listening at 3 different levels.
Okay.
So you listen for the facts.
That was it.
In fact, she said what you do is you have one speaker.
I wasn't listening.
3 people. And the first one, someone else did talk about what you're talking about. The first person only listens to the facts. The second person only listens to the emotion.
Yeah.
And the third person only listens to the will.
Yeah.
And I was like, I really want her to define
so
the
good.
word will, but I've already asked like 6 different words that I want to find in the course of this evening, so I should probably leave it out a bit. People are getting bored of this. But, and it's a really interesting thing to think about because it's true, your attention gets divided between, and often when we have these conversations, and especially this conversation about Jordan Peterson actually, you're getting blurred up between what he's saying and who he is. Like, you like him as a person, that influences how you hear him.
Absolutely.
Massively. So, and it's true with everyone, it's true with everyone we talk about, but I think particularly like if someone is charismatic as he is, it's very hard to actually forget him as a person.
Yeah.
And I listened to the book as an audiobook as well.
Yeah.
I think maybe it would have been better to read it as text.
I still hear him reading it out. But yeah.
You're so familiar with his voice. But I think that's one of the things, like, people, if you hate Jordan Peterson and you listen to him talk, you're going to think everything he says is horrible bullshit.
Yeah.
And if you like him, you're going to think everything he says is wonderful.
Absolutely. And
I think the truth is, as usual, somewhere in between. But like that exercise that she proposed, listening to different levels of communication, is a really good way to engage with any text. Yeah, because it's questioning like what you're projecting. And it's interesting that you thought about what she meant by will and wanting her to define that. That is a form of listening, is to ask somebody, I guess,
please define that. And I think a lot of the problem with Peterson, this is from my own experiences, I will take on what he says, which is like a lot of words, like a lot. He speaks a lot. And the amount I've listened to, the amount that I probably haven't fully understood, but assumed something, and probably assumed something that already fits in with my schema, because I'm not sitting down with him. I don't get to say to him, Jordan, explain what you mean by that. Yeah, no, please.
So critical about Jordan Peterson, you called him Peterson, and then you shifted to calling him Jordan. Like, isn't it? Well, we can listen back.
Okay, that's gonna.
The truth. But she just says,
and then
it's like that.
I don't. That is.
I think it happens all the time to all of us. Like, we're shifting in between the way that we perceive people,
yes,
the way we interact with them, and the way we hear them.
That's really good.
Thinking, like, this conversation we're having is probably different to the conversation we'll have in an hour's time when we're sitting on the sofa drinking wine.
Yeah.
Because not just because at the moment we're aware that people are listening, but also because I'm thinking of you now as Kat, my partner in podcast.
Yeah.
Not Kat, my friend.
Yeah. Yes, and how many of us are doing that all the time? But I think, do you think it's a good thing to be able to have that shift?
I don't know if it's good or bad. I think it's inevitable. I don't know how you'd even interact with people if you didn't do that.
Because I'm imagining if I was speaking to somebody who was like properly anti Jordan Peterson, then maybe they wouldn't be able to shift. They wouldn't move between Jordan and Peterson. They would only see.
Yeah.
If you're so far gone on something, like you probably don't wake up every morning and think, maybe today I will have a bit of bacon.
Yeah.
Like,
when I wake up in the morning, I go, should I be vegan today?
It's like, yeah.
It's a foregone conclusion.
Exactly.
That's what I am. Yeah. So I don't question it so much. I think you're right. We lock stuff down in our mental architecture.
It's easier.
And that's that problem solved forever. This guy's good, this guy's bad, this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do. And I think it's probably much more healthy to be able to take everything out and examine it. But it takes a lot of mental energy.
Yeah.
We don't have that energy day to day. And so we can't help but just be like, that'll do. That conclusion that I've reached will do for the next 10 years, and then maybe I'll have a think about it.
It takes mental energy, and I think a good time to do it is, like we said, when we're listening. So can you, instead of, when you're hearing somebody speak, rather than sifting it in through your own mental filters, can you listen to it from their point of view? I guess it is that thing of taking on another. It's like trying on another person's pair of shoes. They might not fit, but you can probably get your feet into them a bit. God, these analogies, so good.
I hate to get too meta, but isn't that kind of what we're trying to do? Talking about every topic we bring up in this podcast, we're coming at it from two completely different perspectives. That's kind of our shtick.
That is our shtick.
But it's also true, and we thrive on it. Like, being able to shift and say it. And I think this now, when I come across something that I would maybe previously have gone, that sounds a bit like woo nonsense, I think, would Kat be interested in that?
Yes.
And as we have more and more of these conversations, I'm starting to get an insight into what your perspective would be. And I'm not sure it's necessarily changing me, but it is certainly changing something about the way I interact with the world. It might not be changing me as a person, or maybe that is changing. I don't know.
No, and then that's going to be more helpful when you are having these discussions with somebody who is maybe wrapped up in a belief system and you want to bring a more skeptical light onto something. I just wear a band that says WWRD. What would Rebecca do? Should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, so the next one was, the next one that I found interesting was, bring a short passage from the book or extract that you found particularly interesting, helpful, or puzzling.
Yes.
We're going to talk about the extract that I brought because I feel very passionately about it.
Let's do.
And it kind of leads on to talking about some other issues I have with old JBP. So the extract that I brought is from Rule 8, which is tell the truth or at least don't lie.
Oh, I love it.
And the extract is, all people serve their ambition. In that matter, there are no atheists. There are only people who know or don't know what God they really serve. So you can get a sense from, that chapter is called Tell the Truth or at least Don't Lie. And that thing about atheism seems like really unrelated to that. And that's kind of each of these little mini essays, each of the 12 essays, which make up the 12 Rules for Life. They're kind of like that. They go in all sorts of directions.
Oh, yeah.
He has personal anecdotes, he has mythological stories, he has
historical events.
Yeah, not very much scientific research.
No.
But yeah, all sorts of bits and bobs going on there that sort of form a sort of personal essay. And what annoyed me about this, is I'm an atheist, and I object to being told I'm not an atheist. But also right at the end, in the like the last bit of the book, the coda, he says, God, whatever or whoever he may be, is no simple granter of wishes.
Sorry, go on.
Well, if you ever, I just like the meaning of words to be consistent in one text. If you're going to use the word God to mean ambition or a higher purpose or the thing that you think is most important of value, fine. Just you can put that in the glossary. Tell me that's what the word God with a capital letter means in your book. I will read it for that. That's okay. People have different interpretations of words, but you can't switch between two different interpretations in one text. It's fucking confusing.
Especially for somebody who says, be precise in your speech.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, it seems to violate his own rule. And I think if you're going to tell people that they aren't atheists, you better have a pretty fucking robust definition of God.
Yeah.
You can't have it all sloppy and loose like that. That really frustrates, and it particularly frustrates me because of the hypocrisy. Yeah.
So what I would say here is, first of all, part of this is personality type, only because I see myself in Peterson in that way that I find it difficult to be precise in my language. I prefer, and this is just a laziness thing, to live, and maybe it's not, maybe it's something a little bit more, but just to live in that world of yes and no. But going back to that particular phrase, again, I'm just saying this as a sort of reaffirmation of what we just said, because I read that and at first I'm like, that sounds controversial, like a lot of what he says. Yeah. But how am I going to take that? And I almost naturally, I can see my brain doing it, decontroversialize it. So I take it to mean, okay, well, clearly, if he's calling an atheist somebody who believes in a God, then, well, we need to redefine what God means. And so maybe now that means that Jordan Peterson is taking God to mean an explanation, or a worldview, something like that, or like yeah, I mean, he talks a lot about hierarchy, and I'm thinking about the top of hierarchy, but let's just not go down that route. But my mind naturally does that. I don't naturally slam my fist down and say, how dare he say this? Yeah. But that's me interpreting. And so much of this text, and so much of what Peterson says, is this like, he is almost relying on you being like him and interpreting what he's saying like he's interpreting the Bible or Disney movies.
I do think that there's a lot of it's a lot of kind of personality thing, like you either respond to the way he talks or you don't. And I'm kind of a mix, because I love that kind of that storytelling style that he has, where he draws in stuff and all these threads from all over the place. If I was reading a novel, I would love it. But if it's being presented as philosophy,
it's a worldview.
That's frustrating to me. When I want my philosophy, I want definitions clear, and I want reference to data. Like that's how I consume it. And I think, I mean, I'm happy too. If he wants to redefine God as being ambition or anything else, fine. But just keep it consistent, because otherwise I literally don't know what he's saying. Yeah. And he does go on to say something like, you might object, but I'm an atheist. That was me. No, you're not. You're simply not an atheist in your actions. He's literally telling me...
Oh, don't like that. Does it not just make you question it, though? Like, okay, Jordan, I'm listening. Like, in what way?
I mean, to some degree, but, like, he's coming from such an interesting background, because he's like... I presume he was brought up Christian, do you know?
Yes.
So I wasn't. I never had God in my life. No, like, later I had a flirtation with believing in lots of gods and goddesses when I was into Wicca, but I was never really thought of them as like people in the sky. They were more like archetypes. That's my own personal madness that I went through. But I've never had God with a capital G in my life. It's not like I've strayed from the path or anything. That's just never been part of my life. Is he saying literally everyone, even people, even babies right now who have been born, are not true atheists because he's redefined God to mean something so vague that atheists can't exist?
But this is it. So, like, my natural inclination is to, if I don't agree with what he's saying at first, which is somebody who's an atheist can't be an atheist, it's like, okay, clearly he's defining it in a different way. I'm going to keep reading to hear what he means by that. And I've done this, and we'll get to the more controversial, in my view, the things that kind of rub me up slightly the wrong way, and even how I'll approach those when he's saying them. It's not just trying to fit my own worldview to kind of accommodate his. It's more like, how can you read this stuff with that curiosity? Like, okay, prove to me how this is the case.
Yeah.
And then
in a very traditional sense.
I mean, but are you talking about the coda? Because that's not a few paragraphs later. That's at the end of the book, and that is very personal. So I read that and thought, this is a man who does believe in God, probably even a male God with a big hairy beard, even though I don't think he would admit to that.
The weird thing is, I think, like, the people in the book club, they were on your page. Like, when I read out
that
quote
think?
and I said, this is the bit that I found interesting, what do you guys think of this? They all sort of nodded and went, yeah, people do serve their ambitions. It's kind of like a God.
That's it. That is, like, I would say, highly open people. But again, it's but without, it's almost like your respect for precision, which is, again, so funny, because I don't think Jordan is doing that here, especially. Like, because I see you as like an open person, but again, with that thing of, guys, if we're going to have a proper discussion about these big topics, like, I value definitions and clarity. The
other weird thing is, obviously, this is not the only time he's talked about atheists or God. He talks about this stuff a lot, and none of the other people in the room seem to be aware of that. Like, everyone's just like, we picked this book for our book club because it's a bestseller and lots of people are talking about it, let's talk about it. Whereas we came with all this background knowledge of, like, we've heard him talk on podcasts, we've seen his YouTube, I've read lots of articles that are critical of him, not so many that are positive about him, actually. It seems like, you know, most of the articles written in at least the media that I read, is pretty down on him. So I came in with all this weight of expectations and context that the people sitting there didn't have, which makes them really interesting people to talk to about this, because they see it in a completely unbiased, they're just coming straight to the book with no expectations.
And actually, I can see, like, maybe not so much the danger in that, but it's like they're not looking hard enough. Whereas I think you are looking hard at this. And I've only had to look hard at this to counteract my own natural proclivity to be like, I love you, Jordan. So that's interesting. And I think that definitely separated us from the rest of the group.
So what's your take on, you just said you think he believes in God with the beard and everything. What, is that genuine? You think he's a Christian?
No.
Who believes in the literal?
Not quite. I get frustrated every time he gets asked, do you believe in God? Because funnily enough, he does do a bit of a Rebecca here. He says, you need to define what you mean by believe and what you mean by God. So he does say that to other people. And I think he is, in a roundabout way, in a really long-winded way, explaining what he means by God in this book. But could I tell you what that is? No, not succinctly, because it's, again, it comes down to his thing about, like, what is truth. And, you know, him and Sam, like, they never seem to get to the root of this. And actually, the conversations he has with Sam Harris, I think, are the closest you can get a sense of what he's talking about when he's talking about God.
I feel like if I had a conversation with him about these topics, not about his politics, but if I had a conversation with him about truth and God and stuff, I would be saying pretty much the same thing Sam Harris is saying. Actually, there was an interview with him and Matt Dillahunty.
That's the best one.
American atheist. So good.
Yeah.
And he really tries to pin him down on this God question. And I think he's the one who's done the best job. If you're interested in finding out what Jordan Peterson believes in God, that's the closest it's ever got. But it's still this frustrating...
nebulous. Yeah. It's a nebulous cloud. And I think that's fine. And I think that's fine because that's kind of where I am with a lot of these ideas. I definitely, and maybe love is too strong a word, but I love that concept of there being ideas that are more true than bread and butter, more true than things we can measure. And I think the whole God question falls under that. It's that thing of, like, how am I acting? How do humans over time act? What are we scared of? What do we aim towards? What do we naturally do? And I mean, I was just about to do the lobster thing, but it's like, I can't.
Dance she does, by the way. It's a lobster dance she does whenever we talk about Jordan Peterson. I pretend to like it. It's actually quite disorganized.
It's snappy. No, I would love to just write a short paragraph on what I think Jordan Peterson thinks God is.
Yeah.
I wonder if anyone's done that, because it's trying to condense these grand ideas into something small. And
So just to give you ideas, if you never heard him talk about this, I'll give you a flavour of the sort of thing he says. This is from an article by Matt Johnson. I'll put a link to the show notes. And he's reporting on an event that Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson did in Vancouver, where Jordan Peterson said, God is how we imaginatively and collectively represent the existence and action of consciousness across time. God is that which eternally dies and is reborn in the pursuit of higher being and truth. God is the highest value in the hierarchy of values. God is the voice of conscience. God is the source of judgment and mercy and guilt. God is the future to which we must make sacrifices, and something akin to the transcendental repository of reputation. God is that which selects among men in the eternal hierarchy of men.
Oh, it's so good.
Is it though?
Okay, what I will say,
Beautiful.
it is.
Is it conveying anything?
The problem I have with it, that's just occurred to me, is you could replace the word God with some other things.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad I got the across time thing. That's a little Jordanism, which I slipped in. But for example, I remember one of the ones he read out was something to do with like, which we must sacrifice for. Yeah. And his idea of sacrifice is really, really appealing to me as somebody who's like, okay, in order to have a nice clean kitchen, say that's my aim. I have to sacrifice some time and some elbow grease, I guess, or pay somebody to do it. But I understand the idea of like sacrifice, and actually it explains a lot of like, you know, other things like Jordan uses stories in the Bible.
I think there's lots of useful stuff in
but
it.
is that God creating that?
The question, what is God?
Well, but here's
or is he just saying stuff?
Yeah, I agree. It's like, why is God what we sacrifice to? Could that be it? What he's doing, it's kind of like what I guess Jung did and many others, is like taking these things that we do, which maybe like evolutionary psychology can explain and all of that, but they don't do it in a poetic way. He's just doing it in a poetic way, in a simple way, because humans like stories. We understand characters. We anthropomorphize our toasters, for fuck's sake. Like, I was looking at a toaster, but it's that thing of, why not use something like God as a way to explain things? And this is what people like Sam Harris have a massive problem with. Understand
people like Sam Harris.
And
because that's what Sam Harris started off the event that we went to with. He said, how many people here believe in God, like an interventionalist, personal God? And a surprising amount of people in an auditorium in London. I mean, the UK is a very secular place.
Yeah.
I don't know many Christians. I guess maybe you could describe yourself as a Christian.
Oh, I was thinking about that on my way here. I wouldn't, but only because it's too complicated to say that.
You're the closest I know to a Christian.
Interesting. Oh, I'm so proud.
But in the O2 that night, there were lots of people clapping to say yes, they were Christian. And what Sam Harris said was, I worry that this kind of metaphorical conception of God as how we imaginatively and collectively represent the existence of action and consciousness across time that you believe in and that you're talking about is making people think that you support and endorse their belief in a personal interventionalist guy with a beard and
and they're using that to justify their belief in like this man.
And obviously, as someone like Sam Harris is, I don't think that belief in that sort of good is really very good for the world. I think it's led to lots of bad stuff. So I think that's generally a net negative. Instead of encouraging people to believe in humanity and in love and all the nice stuff, like going back to this big guy in the sky who says what's right and wrong and likes certain groups of people and dislikes others, that seems really regressive and bad news to me. So I share Sam's worry about that. And he never really acknowledged that he even understood the problem that Sam had.
Yeah.
See, I call Sam.
But that's really a good point, because I'm just thinking about, you know, which one grows? Well, it's the one you feed. And if you're using what Jordan's saying and saying, well, let's replace the word God with love, or let's use this to support my idea on why I should love my neighbour. Because actually a really good person who does this well is Rob Bell, who talks a lot about the Bible, but will bring it back to like just like love and humanity and good things that you can apply to real life. However, if you use that to apply to something that is like racist and bigoted and like fucking old fashioned, then that's not good. And if you feed that, then Jordan's words will never be used for good.
Yeah. So the interesting question is, why does he keep using the word God? If like,
because it's big. It's like as big as it gets.
But considering it's such a problematic word, I mean that in the traditional sense of problematic, in that it's got all these sort of meanings associated with it and history associated with it and all this stuff, you know?
And that's why he's using it. It's because it's that big. However, something that John was saying, and I thought was really, really good, was that thing of, was it John? But he was basically saying you could you can't catch more bees with honey. Like Jordan would appeal to more people, in his opinion, if he was to soften all of these ideas.
Yeah.
And if he was to shape what he said to kind of still get the same point across, but do it in a more gentle, less controversial way. And I was like, that was one thing that I had a strong opinion on, because I was like, no, I think his controversy is what helps people understand, helps certain people gravitate towards him.
I do not think he'd be the bestseller he is today if he had not said incredibly controversial things.
Of course not.
Everything he's said, like he feeds off this, and he knows he does. In fact, he said in an interview with Joe Rogan, I think, that he's monetizing social justice warriors.
I mean that's the snarky, but like, yeah.
He knows he's offending people. It's part of his business plan.
I mean, I know that. What I would say, I mean, that's like an extreme version of it, but I do know with marketing, like you want to have a niche, right? And you don't want to water down your message. And part of his thing is, I guess he's gotten to that point in life, but it sounds like he was like this for a long time. He gets very strong ideas and opinions, and it's not like he doesn't think about them. He really does, more than most people. But it's getting so fired up about something, you do end up being a controversial character. And I'm sure most successful leaders throughout history, I said successful, not good, have done something similar.
Yeah, it was actually, I can't remember exactly what she said, but one of the women at the book club pointed out that in the intro, the person who, I can't remember what their name is.
Oh, this is funny.
They're quite well known, quite an expert on the subject, is talking about how dangerous ideology is.
Yeah.
And ideologues are, and, just expounding on that theme. And then that's the intro, and then Jordan Peterson starts talking. I mean, he starts talking to me because I'm listening to the audiobook. And she got to chapter 3 and she had to go back and reread the introduction because she was like, is this a joke?
Yeah.
It's obviously an ideologue. Why did he put this introduction in? Because it sounds sarcastic now in retrospect.
I think that was a really smart thing to see. And I saw Jordan Peterson recently in Cambridge, and this is just a solo show. He took one of the rules for life and spoke about that. And then at the end, there were some audience questions. And one of them was, how is what you're saying not an ideology? And he was like, yeah, it's a cult. He was joking, but I can't remember what he said in response. But it's kind of like, if you take this, without a doubt, but he's kind of saying, I guess, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the way I see it is, it's still our responsibility to do what we want with these ideas.
Yeah, I mean, no one's being brainwashed. I don't think brainwashing is really a thing in the way we used to think it was a thing. But I did think it was interesting. He's studied. I mean, that's one of his things, isn't it? He's studied dictators and all this wartime history of all these charismatic leaders, and that's part of what's informed his perspective on the world. But also, it's clearly given him some tips in oration. Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah. I'd like to have a proper definition of ideology, because I don't even know what it means when he's talking about it, really. So,
yeah, does it just mean a belief system?
Exactly, because if that's the case, this is definitely a belief system. But if there's more to it, I don't think he's ever really being overly specific with what he wants you to do. That's the thing, he's not specific.
Tidy up your room.
Pretty fucking harmless. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, even that, I think it is a metaphor.
Yes.
So I think there are just a lot of different metaphors, which I think, taken alone, they're usually pretty harmless, mostly tell the truth and all of that stuff. But he's not saying, actually he is a bit. Because I'm just thinking about groups of people who he might be dismissive of. He kind of is going down that route, right? I think maybe we can probably agree with that.
And encouraging that perspective in his readers.
Which is arguably dangerous.
Yeah, maybe we'll get into that a bit later. But I think the main, at least, well, I don't think John, who wrote the whatever it's called, the synopsis of the book, thinks, and I think he's right, that the general thrust of 12 Rules for Life is we have a society in the West which, because we've given up on God and all those other brilliant things like that, is bereft of meaning.
Yeah.
And that was one of the questions that we discussed,
Yes.
that we got quite deep into. So the question was, meaning is a theme that runs throughout the book. How important is meaning in our lives? And the first thing I said was, can we please define meaning?
Yeah.
And no one would define it for me. And I was so frustrated. I almost wanted to excuse myself and go to the loo just to look at the dictionary definition. Meaning, it's such a... I never thought about it until I read this question.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it.
I've been thinking about it for like a year or something. Just, it can't,
Do you
I can't.
have a definition?
Fuck
Like,
no.
approaching one?
No, I just know that it's, for me, I think, again, if you don't have a definition for something, at least try and work out what it means for you. And for me, it's something to do with, well, I use it interchangeably, but I guess it's purpose. So what is that? So it's like the drive towards something. It's like a conscious drive towards something. And it's the difference between me being like apathetic about life, and to me, that's synonymous with depression. It's like sitting in bed and being like, nothing sounds good.
Yeah.
And it's just like that blandness. It's not like anything's bad, because when you have something bad, you're driven towards either correcting the bad thing or moving away from it.
Yeah.
So I think it's that. It's like good or bad. I don't even think meaning's necessarily even a good thing, but it seems to me that it's better than nothing.
You should have spoken up when I said, what's your definition of meaning?
Oh, I only just thought of that.
Because I go to the beach and I feel really connected with nature.
Yeah, that's not meaning.
And then someone else said, for me, meaning is like contributing to my society by working at a food bank.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, these are just examples of things you find meaningful.
They're almost
what meaning is.
like stock phrases.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, maybe that's what it is for these people. So like I said, again, I think it's, what does it mean for you?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe it's something like meaning is like a lens of interpretation through which you see the world.
Which it could be for you. Yeah.
Something, I don't know, something like that, like a... Like you were talking before about schemas.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's...
Where are you going to fit this into your mental model of the world?
Yeah, your Jenga.
Meaning the model, the whole model, or
Yes.
I don't know, the blueprint for the model, I don't know, something like that. But anyway, he blows right through that, like he does on everything, because he doesn't define his words.
Yeah.
Because he's Jordan Peterson, he doesn't need to define words. And I guess what he's saying is that meaning is just like something that can only really be provided by these really deep, ancient philosophies of life, particularly the Christian ones.
Oh, I didn't get that. I feel like I wonder what I don't know what rule that all came
I think it's from Rule 7, see what is meaningful, not what is expedient.
Yes, and that really makes sense to me, even on a practical level. I'm trying to think of an example here, because I do think he lays this out quite well. I think about it a lot when I'm trying to make decisions. For me, doing something really efficiently, but it's not worth doing, something I used to spend a lot of time doing, and I've stopped doing that, and I feel better for it. So I think that can be a really good guiding purpose, and not even a guiding purpose, like, because it's a good guide for living life, and that's all he's trying to do. This is a rule for life.
The actual rule to see what's meaningful and not what's expedient
Yeah,
is a good rule.
but how does he define meaning? It's not clear. I think it's probably similar to what I'm saying there. It's kind of like being driven towards something. And not just doing it either for the sake of it or just taking like the shorter route.
Yeah.
Don't cut corners, I think, is a really big takeaway I got from that. Just helpful.
So I mean, generally, people seem quite positive. I mean,
On the whole.
they did say, like you said, John was saying, if he was nicer, he'd probably sell more books, which I don't think is true. But actually,
I don't think it's
true.
true.
Have you seen The Princess Bride?
Yes.
I love that movie. Anyway, there's a bit where Wesley says, life is pain, Highness. Anyone who says differently is selling something.
Yeah.
And that's our romantic lead. He's the hero of this story. And he's saying, life is pain, Highness. People need to hear that, especially if they're in a place of pain. They need that to be recognised.
Right.
So I think this idea that if he was a bit softer, if he was a bit gentler, he'd sell more books isn't true. But there was one woman at the book club who was a psychologist, I think.
Yeah.
Something. And she said, I wrote notes down in the taking notes on the other people as we went. And she said in the course of the couple of hours we ended up talking about him, she said he seems like a guy who has deep mental issues.
Yeah.
He's probably depressed.
Yeah, which he does admit to.
And the words lost and troubled came up as well. So I think it's like, this guy, he's a complex, dark character.
I mean, I would strongly disagree with the idea of lost, because I think he might have been lost at one point, but he's used this and words like this to find something. And I think his work and his style and everything, its controversy, has been bred out of a time of trouble, and not troubled, but he did grow up in this like shitty town.
It sounds horrible.
Yeah, and he talks about it in the book, and he's really open about all the things, depression, all of this stuff. And I think this is a great illustration for what meaning can do to somebody. He's used all that crap to create something pretty damn impressive. A lot of the people he went to school with did not do that. But does that mean that that's a great example of why just pure trouble and, clinical depressive issues, or all of those like mental things that like the woman was talking about, do they always create something as impressive as this?
Yeah.
They certainly fucking don't. They don't. So I think just to say, oh, well, I'm going to kind of like write him off because I disagree with a few things. Yeah.
Very dismissive.
Yeah. Which I think is arbitrary.
Well, I don't know. I think you can definitely see that his views are coloured by his personal experience.
Isn't everyone's?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you're right. Of course, you can't just disregard someone because they suffered from depression. I was surprised. To be honest, the reason why, because Kat mentioned she was going to this book club just in passing, and I was like, ooh, I want to come to that too. And the reason why I had that reaction was because I assumed that there was going to be controversy. And I actually said to you, do you think it'll be okay if I don't talk much and just sit at the back and watch?
Yeah.
Because I've been interested in this character of Jordan Peterson and what he's about, and he's so polarising, and the whole thing is just fascinating. And I thought I can just be a fly on the wall and watch all these people fight about Jordan Peterson. But there was no fighting. I
think people were probably watching us more than anything. It's like, what do the people who actually know what this guy is talking about thinking about it?
At one point you made some comment about Jordan Peterson's fans, and someone said, oh, may I ask how you got that information, or where did you read that or something? And you said, oh, from his YouTube channel. And they looked at you like, I'm not even sure what YouTube is.
Oh, really?
There was really
yeah.
There was a divide.
There were lots and lots of moments like that where I was saying something that would be assumed if you were talking to, like, again, it's the circles that you intellectually travel in. Yeah. And
that's right. You mentioned the intellectual dark web.
Oh my god, yeah, of course. And yeah, like, that bad idea. I should have just called it the IDW and just left it at that.
Yeah, but I wondered whether the reason why we were sticking so much to the text was because John had specifically said at the beginning, we're going to try and talk about the book and not about the person. It's really important to talk about the book and not the person. So maybe people were deliberately steering clear of that because they maybe they had those discussions in previous books.
That's a good point. I found that a little bit like unfun, but really smart. Like I can see the value in it.
But some of my concerns about Jordan Peterson apply to him as a person and also to the book.
Yes. Like how can you? I mean, it is really hard to separate those things, and I think it's hard to separate because I can see the value in it anyway. I can see the value in taking this book in the context of Jordan Peterson and the controversy. I think you can be both more critical of it, and potentially you could also use it to be, like I just did about the mental health thing, more forgiving of it as well.
I think the main thing that I think troubles me about maybe not the main thing. It's so hard to pick what troubles me the most about it. But one of the things, postmodernism.
Okay, yeah.
And this is really interesting because I studied postmodernism at university, and I didn't like it either. Like, I found it vague, and like people were playing word games, and it was frustrating, and it seemed like a lot of people were kind of make it up as they went along. And I don't know, there was just generally I didn't get on with postmodernism, which is unsurprising because, you know, I'm a very literal person, and the whole thing about postmodernism is kind of playful engagement with language. And so when I was first hearing about Jordan Peterson, I was like, oh, he doesn't like postmodernism. I don't like postmodernism. We'll probably be BFFs.
Yeah.
But then when he started talking about postmodernism, he wasn't talking about what I studied at university.
Yeah.
He has this whole, and maybe, I don't know, it seems like when he says postmodernism, he's talking about some kind of like social movement.
Yeah.
He's not talking about my problems, which are like obscurantism, presenting basically amazing art as scholarship.
Yeah.
Which I think is an insult to both categories, because I'm an artist and I respect art and I think it's wonderful and I respect objective scholarship, but I'd like them to stay in their own lanes, please. And that, you know, postmodernists are always making unfalsifiable claims, which is frustrating to me. But these are all things that Jordan Peterson
does.
So how ironic that the things that I don't like about I do like some things about postmodernism as well, to be clear. Like, I love questioning meta-narratives, like asking why we believe what we believe. That's like one of my main hobbies. So postmodernism, there's good and bad in it. But all the things that I don't like about postmodernism could also be said of Jordan Peterson.
That's the thing. Every time that and there hasn't been a lot, but when I have looked into what is postmodernism, it does seem to be a lot similar to what Peterson is doing. So I'd be interested to get a better definition of what he means when he talks about it.
Yeah. So
and what his problem is specifically.
Yeah, because again, it's really, really
vague.
And I think, you know, like, the idea of questioning our own understanding of things and all that stuff is so valuable, and it'd be really valuable for him as well. So it's like he's taking the bad bits of postmodernism and doing those, and the good bits of postmodernism just ignoring them, and then complaining that postmodernism is ruining the world. I'm like, but you're engaging with it in this really odd way. Or I don't know, maybe I'm engaging with it wrong, but something is going on there. And it could be like an American. Well, I guess he's not American; he's Canadian. But it could be a different type of postmodernism.
Yeah, or just
they're Americans,
right? Or just something that he's experienced, either in universities or like elsewhere, and more in those political spheres, or people using postmodernism to back up their political claims, which I think is possible. Could it be?
Although I don't know
how you would do it.
To back up any claims, because the whole point of postmodernism is deconstructing claims.
Yeah.
There's like this phrase he keeps throwing around, postmodern neo-Marxist. I'm like,
what does that even?
Could you be a postmodern Marxist? That makes no sense. Postmodernism is about taking things apart, taking ideologies apart. Marxism is an ideology. It's kind of like this weird...
Or maybe it's deconstructing something so that you're not left with anything, but then you replace it with something that Jordan Peterson doesn't agree with.
Yeah, it's almost like he's just taken a couple of words that people don't like and smushed them together.
Yeah.
That thing you all don't like, I don't like that either.
Yeah.
Buy my books.
Yeah.
So that I find frustrating, but it's hard to pin down, because it's hard to pin him down on anything.
Yeah, similarly, I mean, one of the things I struggle most with is when he talks about women, which is unsurprising, even though I'm usually pretty relaxed when people talk about the differences between men and women. And for the most part, I agree with what he says. I get, and he uses science here. I mean, close to science. He uses a personality type test. He uses the Big Five to say things like, not only are there biological differences between what we call men and women, he also says there are personality type differences.
I think that's generally, that's the Big Five personality index is fairly well respected within personality science. I don't think that's necessarily something we need to be skeptical about. But the interesting thing about like biological differences is like you can only do these personality tests on adult humans, right? So they already have
they've been socialized.
Okay. It's a bit of a reach for me.
There is.
But there are certainly differences. I mean, that's undeniable.
I mean, the reason I would say biological, because he will bring it back to what you might see in the wild and like biological reasonings behind why a woman would be more agreeable.
Yeah, I mean, it does.
And more nurturing and all of that.
To be slightly different. We're different, below our necks. Why would we be different above? But
the problem I have with that then is, well, how is that going to then apply to the real world? And he says, well, because women are like this and men are like this, well, it's pretty natural that men are going to end up working longer and harder and moving up the career ladder more because personality-wise, they want to do that. And similarly, women are like going to be more likely to want to settle down and have a family. And I find that hard because I don't fall onto that category. Yeah. And that I think is hard for so many people. And it's so understandable. It's like, if you're saying we're mostly like this, and that's how it should be. And he does, without a doubt, make a big thing about the importance of family and having family. And like, if you know, what are the things that Jordan Peterson thinks you need for a happy life? He will say family, like pretty unabashedly. And also that the mum and dad should stay together. And like, maybe you could look at stats and be like, statistically, maybe that's easier for the kid and rah, rah, rah. But what he is doing is like very uncompassionately saying these things without thinking about the people who it's not true for. And that's about as far down, you know, that kind of I guess I am being a bit like social justice warrior on that, but it's a really simple thing. It's like, Jordan, have some fucking compassion for somebody who doesn't fit in your model, like myself.
Yeah, and me, like, it's interesting to be talking about this, the two of us, because we're both women who don't fit that model. I'm never going to have children. I don't think you're planning on it anytime soon. We don't conform to the stereotype that he's pushing of women. I mean, maybe I'm a bit agreeable sometimes, maybe too agreeable sometimes. I have been told. Not on this podcast, though. Very disagreeable on this podcast, but it's an effort. But yeah, we don't conform to that stereotype.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of what when he talks about men and women and what they are and who they are, isn't actually drawn from the science, although he does reference the science. It seems like he's drawing from a more like mythological, you know, man as order, woman as chaos.
Oh, that's another issue. The book, isn't it? Yeah, so that is another issue, I would say, altogether. But and one I find explaining to people quite often. So when people, and the thing is, it's crazy that he doesn't think about people's objections in advance and then kind of justify it in his speech. Because what I would say, whenever I talk about archetypes, and I might talk about the feminine and the masculine, I really do not mean man and woman. And you will have that in, you know, I'm learning about like the philosophy of yoga. And we're talking a lot about I was going to say yin and yang, but like their version of it. But the idea of there is this masculine and the feminine, and it exists in one. And it doesn't mean that a woman is 100% feminine. Like, these are just different things. We've just happened to call it masculine and feminine. In the same way that, I mean, I think a lot about the, in like the Latin languages, you have those feminine, damn it, we have like those feminine words and masculine words and like neuter often. French as well, yes, that's what I was thinking of. And like you're not thinking that word is literally a man. Like it's not like it doesn't have a sex. So that's like how I understand. Decoupled from female and male. Yes, it's like something that transcends that. Yes, 100%. And that's how I tries to see this stuff here, and I do think that that's what most people mean when they are sensibly talking about archetypes. Okay, so with that, the fact that he's talking about order being masculine and chaos being feminine, and people like instantly jump to, well, chaos is bad and it's feminine. Well, that doesn't bode well for women, right? No. Like, first of all, stop conflating feminine and women. The thing is, the fact that Jordan is saying an antidote to chaos just seems fucking silly, because it's like saying an antidote to darkness. You can't say that both masculine and feminine are like, you know, neither is good, neither is bad, neither is man, neither is woman. You can't do the same. You can't do that with chaos and order either. In my books, you need both. Yeah. And that's my problem with Jordan Peterson's subtitle. It's a really weird subtitle. So dumb. If he is saying we need a balance between order and chaos, then calling his book An Antidote to Chaos is... Yeah, I hope he regrets that.
That he thinks there's a war between chaos and order.
Yes.
And he is on the side of order. Like,
yeah, and order looks like this. And it's like it's fact that order looks like this.
Yeah.
And that there is this hierarchy, and that must be the best way it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with that, but I think calling one thing good and one thing bad is fucking silly. And like, you know, if you look at the oldest religions, maybe let's look at Hinduism, I don't think it's clear that one was good and one was bad. In fact, it really wasn't. And this is kind of why Jordan definitely stands up a lot. Pretty much everything he talks about does mostly come from Western culture, psychology, civilization, religion. When you look at the East, a lot of his ideas, I think, would break down. I can't claim that to be definite, but it seems to be that way.
Yeah. I think one of the things that people really strongly react against with Jordan Peterson is this order thing, and order, especially in the American political landscape, is linked to kind of Republican conservative values, and that's definitely what he's about. So even if he's maybe that's
he's
not
a classic liberal.
He describes himself as a classic liberal, but he's talking about the family, the importance of the family. He's giving all these kind of things that would fit in with
God, families.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, he may not define himself as a Republican, but you can see why
in his behaviours.
Yeah, he would appeal to that base. And I feel like I think it's a really interesting observation that there's balance between order and chaos and blah, blah, blah. I even think the observation about us lacking meaning is an interesting one. And I think there's lots of amazing writing, like Alain de Botton writes a lot about how we create meaning as humanists and how we move forward without God. I think all of those are interesting conversations. But Jordan Peterson's answer seems to be regressive. Like, let's go back to when men and women fulfilled certain roles.
Yeah.
And that's like the best criticism I found of him, the most like coherent criticism. There's this amazing YouTuber called ContraPoints. I'll put a link in the show notes. And basically, she says that the self-help stuff and that this whole book, she's not entirely critical, and this is why I think you'd engage well with her, because she's not like Jordan Peterson's evil or anything. In fact, it's hilarious. She has like, well, I won't spoil the video for anyone who wants to watch it, but it's very clever and funny, and she refers to him as daddy many times.
Oh, I instantly like her.
Exactly. So she basically says that the self-help stuff is, and you might argue that this is not on purpose, but I think it's a fair criticism, it's kind of like a Trojan horse for sort of reactionary politics. Like, it's sneaking under the back door. So, like, all this stuff we're talking about, like how he's talking about postmodern neo-Marxism and the way he talks about intellectuals and students, and it's like all these bad people who are out there trying to ruin the world. And as far as I see it, what he's suggesting is the solution to that isn't, well, let's form something new that is more balanced and more creative and gives everyone a place. He's saying, no, let's go back to what was old and worked.
Yeah.
It's like, but it didn't work for these people. It didn't work for people who don't fulfill. It doesn't work for you and I. We're not going to be happy if we become housewives. It doesn't work for lots and lots of people. And he's saying, yeah, but it works for most people, so that's what we should do. And I think that's what, and that kind of slides into that, like, that kind of...
Well, it's a slippery slope in a way. Yeah, it would be interesting to see where this goes. You know, he is going to be bringing out another book, 12 More Rules for Life. And that all sounds quite harmless, you know, going around giving speeches. But I worry about that for myself. If this is a slippery slope and I get political in any way, slap me. I'm all about what he's saying for, you know, getting your room in order maybe, and, you know, how to move towards something that you care about and not to be a lazy person. But that's all the self-help stuff. If I was to start applying this to groups of people and how I feel about them, like, Jesus, that doesn't seem helpful.
Yeah. It's, and we should probably be clear that we're completely out of our depths talking politics.
Yeah.
Neither of us are interested in politics or informed about politics, and especially not about Canadian politics or American politics.
Yeah.
But the whole thing that kind of brought him to prominence, where he was complaining about gender
pronouns.
Yeah. So the Canadian Human Rights Bill is like a bill, and it says you have to treat everyone with respect and decency, and there are certain groups of people. And they list them, and most countries have bills like this, I assume. Actually, maybe America doesn't. Anyway, but a list of people that you can't be mean to, basically. Like, don't ever pick on someone because of their sexuality, don't pick on someone because of their gender, don't pick on someone because of their race, all these things that there are people who have historically experienced discrimination, and you have a list of them in the Act, and they were adding gender identity to that list of people you can't be mean to. So that's kind of vague. Like when Jordan Peterson talks about it, he's like, I could be put in prison for saying the wrong gender pronouns. That's not quite right. What was happening is there's already a law that exists, and they're just adding another category of person to that law of people that you can't be mean to. And I can kind of see from an anarchist perspective, although I don't think he's an anarchist, that he might object to the law full stop. He might say, there should just be a law saying we should be decent to people. Why do we need all this list of categories? This is bullshit. But then why object specifically when they try and add basically trans people to this list?
And it was that thing of, I mean, the way he would say it is, okay, well, you've got this bill which sounds pretty harmless, but if that's going to mean cutting back on my freedom of speech any further, then it's not good. Like, it does fall apart when you think about that. Like, when you think that we already have similar bills in place.
Law was being invented. But when you hear him talk about
for him, it's almost like, to me, it smacks of his own fears about the Cold War and all of that stuff that has happened, which he will admit to having been obsessed with, and probably maybe to an extent still is. So for him, I don't think it's like malicious, like he would want to be horrible to these people. It's more like genuine fear, like proper scared of people having any more control on him than they do. And what would happen if this got out of hand. And I do think that does sound like the ravings of a madman.
It sounds a bit like a conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
It together with this postmodern neo-Marxist thing, like, which doesn't really mean anything, but has come to symbolize a lot in his mind and in the minds of his audience, presumably, because he keeps harping on about it.
He does have a lot of the markings of a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you say, it'll be interesting to watch where he goes. But I was thinking about this and why, because I don't think he's lying. I don't think he's lying about what the Canadian law said. I think he genuinely was, like you say, I think he was genuinely concerned about it. And I think the reason he was concerned is not because he thinks he will literally be put in prison for saying the wrong gender pronoun. I think he realises that's not true. But the way he engages with the world is in this kind of archetypal, grand way. And he sees this law as symbolic. And he responded to it in a symbolic fashion. And if you think, well, Mr. Peterson, Dr. Peterson, you are misrepresenting the facts about this law, and you're kind of encouraging people to be really unpleasant to trans people, which they already get it hard enough anyway. So what the fuck are you up to? He seems like a maniac. Yeah. But when you see it as he's responding symbolically to something he thinks of as this dangerous myth that's got out of hand, then he also seems like a maniac, but a different type of maniac.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and maybe one we can have a little bit more sympathy for. I don't know. Yeah.
So, harms and benefits?
I don't know, I guess if you go with ContraPoints, and I do generally think she's making some very good points. I do worry about that kind of like slipping in, and also the same thing Sam Harris said, slipping in God by the back door, slipping in reactionary,
which is, I think,
politics
arguably, I mean, for me, that's more scary than slipping in God, but
I don't know which
terrifies you more. Yes, I feel like this is having this conversation has really clarified some of my non-existent ideas on him. I think I've listened. But I think what I'm going to have to do personally is hold him with a slightly more extended hand than I wanted to. It's really easy for me, just because the way he speaks and some of the stuff, probably quite like old stuff that he's tapping into, probably from being brought up as Catholic. I think I just need to be careful with where that goes. And, you know, like we talk about a lot, is this making me feel better or worse? If I'm finding myself getting angry at the world, probably not helping me, probably going down a more, or like scared about certain things. But, you know, if he's kind of making me feel more enthusiastic about the world we live in, which he actually does often, and more empowered, which I get from him as well.
I think that's interesting you say empowered, because I think a lot of the negativity that comes towards him is coming from the fact, like, self-help as a genre is all about empowerment, right? And it's kind of naturally about individualism, because if you read any self-help book you read, it tells you how to act to be a better person. And that's kind of an inherently, if we think about it in a political sense, that's inherently conservative, because a liberal would say, how can we change the system?
Oh,
the system is broken.
interesting.
How can we fix it so that everyone gets what they need?
Oh,
Whereas
fuck that.
A conservative would say, I can only change myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to change myself to work
on the system.
and to move up the hierarchy. In
Well,
Peterson's language,
maybe I'm a bit of both. Maybe I'm like, I will work on myself in order to maybe change the system for the better. Maybe.
Yeah.
But
I think
primarily
you
work on myself.
need both.
Yeah.
But maybe a lot of the resistance, and one of the reasons why he's such an enemy of kind of lefty American people, is because the very genre in which he's working is a kind of like individualistic, right sort of political thing instead of a left political thing. So like, it's really interesting to see how people respond to him. And this is, again, like, this is one of, as I said before, this is what John said, don't respond to the person, respond to the book. But it's impossible.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And also to figure out what you're feeling or thinking about him, and how much of that is informed by
the controversy that you've seen. Yeah,
the articles you read, all the stuff, to actually get down to what you really think and feel about his message is really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to have you talking about your appreciation for his work, because you're not his traditional audience. And I don't know, like, what is it? Like, especially when you laughed when I said she calls him daddy, but this is not uncommon. Right?
Yeah. No, oh my God, yeah, for sure. Like,
what's he fulfilling for you? Why is that word appropriate? I mean, even if obviously you're only joking, but still there's something to it.
No, definitely. I think there is something about having this patriarchal figure who isn't in a kind, like, it's kind because it's for your own good, but it's not softly telling you how you should live your life. It's like, again, in the same way that, in church, like, you've got the priest kind of telling you what to do. I can't tell you why that appeals. That is a psychological thing that I've got, which I think many people, I was going to say women, but I think it's just a people thing. Sometimes we just need to have, like, a man tell us what to do, which is crazy. Like, who would admit to that? But I basically can. And probably because I mean, to give you a rough idea, this isn't because I have like a terrible relationship with my dad. Like, I took my dad to see Jordan Peterson because I wanted to know that my dad approved of my other dad. Yeah, it's nuts. And also he did, because a lot of their even phrases and ideas are similar. And so, like, maybe I see a bit of my dad in Peterson.
That's really interesting. I wonder if that's a common thing. Like, I mean, obviously this didn't come out of nowhere. This phenomenon of his fans referring to him as dad.
Yeah.
Probably quite a lot of people.
It's the archetype of, I mean, I would say I think there's one that is like the great king or something, which is, or the benevolent king, which is what I think Peterson hopes to be. And I think he is for me at the moment. Yeah.
Wow.
Why? What do you mean, wow?
No, I mean,
it's just a phrase.
Yeah,
but it's big. And I think that's what's kind of scary about the whole situation.
Yeah. I think, I mean, this is not just from this conversation. We've talked about Jordan Peterson many times, as I alluded to at the beginning. And we've been going back and forth, and listeners will notice, I'm sure, that Kat is definitely more on the side of poetic truth, and I'm more on the side of empirical truth. And this is like, so one of the reasons why we were so interested to go see Sam Harris versus Jordan Peterson is because it's kind of archetypical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of our own disagreements between each other. But I think if I hadn't had you in my life when I interacted with Jordan Peterson's work, I definitely would have been more dismissive. I would have been more ready to believe that all his fans were angry white men.
Yeah. And
that he had nothing of value to say. And I think talking to you about it has made me think more carefully about, it still annoys me how vague he is. I still worry about some of the political stuff. But I'm starting to see that it's not that he doesn't have anything of value, it's that maybe I can't engage with it because of just the way I'm put together.
Yes.
I wonder if he wrote a novel, I'd probably love it.
Well, these are really good points. And again, he's appealing to a certain demographic, certain personality type, and fulfilling maybe even a certain need for people. And I think that's fine as long as you have your wits about you and you take the good and dismiss the bad. Like, you don't have to take it all.
I think that should be like our tagline for our podcast: keep your wits about you.
It's so old fashioned. I feel like I'm channeling an old man right now. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know with a tweet or an email. We'd love to hear about your experiences.
Yes, please tell us what we got wrong. You can email us at hello@seekerandskeptic.com and follow us on Twitter @seekerskeptic.
You'll find the show notes for this and every episode at seekerandskeptic.com.
And you can find my skeptically themed comics at rebeccaonpaper.com or follow me on Twitter @RebeccaOnPaper.
And I'm at Yogis Who Shave on Twitter, and you can find me bringing secular yoga to the masses at yogiswhoshave.com.
If you like what you heard and fancy supporting the show and spreading the word, we'd really appreciate a rating and review in the Apple Podcast Store.
Or tell somebody you know about the show.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
You mock my pain!
Life is pain, Highness. Anyone who says differently is selling something.